welcome to the second session for the afternoon. Welcome online as well. If you're in Tokyo, I hope the coffee's good because it must be about 2 a.m., 3 a.m. My name is Ben Walden. I'm running a session tomorrow about storytelling and inspiration. I'm here to introduce for you now two individuals from McKinsey's, which means they're going to be super bright because I've never met anyone from McKinsey's who wasn't super bright. So we have here Sam Lee, who works with McKinsey's in New York, and Veronica Gomez, who works with McKinsey's in Costa Rica. And they're going to talk about a subject which I think is pretty relevant for most of us, emerging tech in learning from overwhelming to innovative. Over to you two. Thank you. Give a round of applause.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're very happy that you chose this session. So my name is Veronica Gomez. I'm a learning design expert from Costa Rica. I am really passionate about people development. So luckily I'm in the right field. And I aspire to create joyful and equitable learning experiences for our learners.
And my name is Sam Lee. I'm a learning design expert on the same team as Vero's, based in New York. Before joining McKinsey, I used to work with so many different organizations, including higher ed, international nonprofit, you name it. I am a proud working mom of a 6-year-old kid, and I am professionally committed to equipping working professionals in all parts of the world with digital leadership skills and tech skills for their future. So this is a great topic that's at the middle of my heart. So I am super excited to be part of this group.
We're both part of McKinsey's Learning Design Center of Excellence, which means we create learning experiences for our colleagues. And one of the functions of this group is the Research and Innovation Learning Lab. So everything that we're going to tell you about today is part of the work that we do as part of that function. What we're hoping that you'll gain today is that you'll walk out of here with a few ideas of things that you can start implementing with your teams or with yourself. We hope that you will quickly scan the emerging tech landscape in the next hour, set a targeted fluency goal for you or your team, identify some quick, manageable, incremental actions that you can take. And in the end, we're going to talk about how you might sustain those efforts. So it's not a one-time thing.
All right, so all just to say, like, we're here today just to sort of discuss and explore, like, how to keep up with this amazingly, rapidly changing landscape of emerging technologies. But before we dive in, I just want to take a step back a little bit and then add a bit of a context in terms of why we think it is really important. So at the lab, we've been exploring emerging technologies that have been influencing the learning space. Our primary focus is obviously the workforce learning, but broadly looking into the different disciplines of learning space. And initially, we've observed so many different innovation cases involving emerging technologies that you all are pretty much aware of, including generative AI and advanced machine learning algorithms impacting on adaptive learning platforms that may improve the personalized learning at scale. Also, blockchain and Web3 technologies promise to offer some more transparency and also digitization opportunities for credentialing students and also learners' achievements and such. What we are now observing is how these emerging technologies are rapidly transforming the way we work and the way we learn, how we are observing recent advancements of generative AI is now embedded in every fabric of work and life that we are in. So what does it mean for us is that we really think at the lab that everybody in this room, or learning professionals and educators, have a critical role in shaping organizational adaptability and resilience for the future. We really think that we have critical role. And why is that? Is that because we wear like 10,000 different hats in our organization. If you imagine, we often have to perform this role of trusted advisor to our business stakeholders to help them go through the transformative changes within the organization. We so often have to act as an innovation leader to shape some culture of continuous learning and innovation as well, to foster that culture. And finally, we make some informed decisions on investment on new technologies, which may directly interact with our learners or students. So we really think like that's like some sort of aspiration that we have at the lab. But oftentimes my colleagues from my current team and also former teams tell me, Sam, like this is an amazing aspiration. I really want to achieve this. But I often feel like extremely overwhelmed and I feel lost. Like I'm already stretched thin. I'm going through a lot of constraints in my role. Like how am I going to be able to effectively equip ourselves to keep up with and lead through the innovations to really play this role? So we are here to talk about that, and we're still constantly learning throughout our own journey. And Vero here is going to go a little step further in terms of why.
Yeah, so we wanted to ask you a question. So as Sam mentioned, this is a fantastic aspiration, but the reality is that it is not easy. So we wanted to ask for a volunteer or two to share what they have observed. What do you think is challenging about innovating with new technology?
What I've noticed personally in my context is bringing everyone on board. Like it's not a one-person effort. It's a whole team, faculty members, like everybody has to be involved in the change.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to share?
A lot of times there are funding issues around it. Things that are really brand new tend to be expensive, and there's not always enough existing justification to warrant spending that kind of money if you don't have it already.
Great. And one more?
I find in corporate environments, it's often the business leaders who are like, I need 2 hours of training on X, and not really thinking about like what their ultimate business goal is. Just, I need training.
You're right.
Yes. Thank you so much, everybody. So in general, what we observe is that to create this culture of innovation, you need 4 elements. So you need role models in the organization. So the leaders, the people who have influence to perform the behaviors of a culture of innovation. So, asking the right questions, experimenting, testing out the technology. You also need people to have the skills, which is something all of us here can help with. You need people to know how to use that technology, know the use cases for it. You need a cultural mindset. So you need everybody on the organization to have conviction on why it is that you need to behave in this new way. And finally, you need to think about the reinforcing mechanisms. So the systemic support for innovation. And within the L&D space, we hear a lot of the same things that you mentioned before. So time and resource constraints. A lot of times for ourselves, we leave ourselves last because we're developing others. So a lot of times we don't invest in developing ourselves. We also see that people feel overwhelmed because there's too much emerging tech. It changes all the time. It's a little bit too fast. And also, a lot of times people say that they don't have the technical knowledge to truly understand. So they're intimidated and they cannot see the practical value for an emerging technology. So in this session, we're going to focus on one of those aspects, skill building, and how do we continuously learn about new technology considering this very fast pace and all of our constraints. So in the lab, and mainly Sam, created a framework.
And I also wanted to add, like from online, there was a amazing comment that there isn't often time to innovate when you have a pressing problem you are trying to solve. So if you lack the confidence, it is really hard to implement. So
Yes.
I think this is a great point, and this is a great segue for us to actually give you a little quick snap, like at a glance overview of what our approach looks like. So in preparation for this, we've gone through rounds of interviews and also baseline surveys to just understand what are the common challenges that our colleagues have. And we kept hearing these 3 common questions. And we this approach that you see on the screen is like really directly responding to those 3 common challenges. One question is around, how do I filter through the noise? Like, how do I filter through the noise? How do I know that one technology is not just a shiny object, something that's meaningful for our transformation and our vision? So to that, our part 1 for this approach is scanning fast. Rapidly gauging relevance and importance of emerging tech in solving your problems. So the key point here is like really going through your thought process around your problem and your challenge as opposed to an external influence. The second question here that we often hear is like, where do I start? What do I need to focus on? Like, it's just like so much when it comes to emerging tech, starting from all the underpinning science, technology, and all the knowledge, all the way to practical implications of it for our team and also for our learners. So we basically address that question by introducing setting some targeted goals. We're going to go a little bit deeper into that, but we really think it is important to think about different dimensions of fluency, but also setting the targeted goal that specifically addresses your team and your needs. The third question, which may be the most critical piece of our session today, is I would love to do this, but I'm already stretched thin. I'm going through so many different constraints. How do I get started? So the third part is like basically describing how you might want to take easy and small incremental actions towards your goal. So we're going to go into a little deeper dive into each part of the approach, starting with the scan fast. And scan fast is basically a thought process that you can take looking into 4 different aspects of your problem. So the first question that you can think of is like around, how can this technology address our challenge or our problem? So that's like really looking into the problem that your organization or your team is currently facing. The second question is, will everyone else be using this soon? And when we say everyone else, it could be your competing organization, it could be another team within your own community, but like that does like some similar roles and responsibilities, or it could be the entire industry. So thinking about some practicality, some emerging technology might be really promising in some parts of the industry or another industry, while it may not be so much practical for our industry. So thinking about that. The third question is around, does it really fit with our team's priority and strategy goals? So if I were to like put maybe like some recommended time frame here is like within 2 to 3 years. So does it really fit with our priorities and goals? And then finally, will it be safe for us? So my current organization cares about privacy a lot, and also protection of our firm information. So really critical for us to think about like whether this technology enables us to think about like safety, use, and also compliance. So that process can actually look really simple as a self-reflection process within yourself or with your team. But it could also be a bit more structured or rigor. So you can basically add 2 more questions to make it a bit more structured if you are a bit more committed to take more time looking into this process. So one is around what signals can we track And are there any supporting metrics and data and information that can support your decision? So the lab actually started going through this process as real, just self-reflective team discussions. And in recent years, we've developed a little more rigor and structure to it. So here's what we have now. And this is something called quarterly tech radar for learning. So what it does is, like, on a quarterly basis, we're scanning through different signals and trends across 12 different key metrics. That covers 4 different aspects of questions that we just discussed. And then we basically group them into 2 different aspects: potential value for learning and also estimated feasibilities. And then what we do here is mapping all of the emerging technologies through the index scores from 0 to 100, and then mapping those into 3 different buckets that are a bit action-oriented. So this sort of informs our internal teams and colleagues what our perspective is around emerging technologies. So this is one simple example of what it may look like. But if your team is not so much committed or may not have enough resources to go through, because it takes about, in our case, 6 to 9 hours at least to go through this. There are some external resources. I'm sure some of you may already know that there's some tech radar from places like Gartner or ThoughtWorks that offer some similar insights. So now I just want to take a moment to just digest here a little bit, and then give you some preview of what it looks like, what the process looks like. So we're going to work with someone sitting next to you and pick maybe one new technology that you're considering just for yourself or with your team, and just discuss with your partner, going through these 4 questions within the next 5 minutes. So we're going to have 5 minutes of just little exercise, going through these questions, talking about the new technology that you're considering, and also just share out what your thoughts are. And consider this as a very preliminary process. So you don't need to know every single thing about this technology to answer these questions perfectly, but just try out just going through this process. Sorry? We're okay. Yes.
Someone is asking if the chart is using the link to it.
Oh, I may need to double confirm because. Oh, okay. Yeah. But if you could just be cautious, sharing, because this is a minstrel presentation and I need high teams of people. Yeah. So you can direct them to contact later.
Three more minutes. I should not tell at all, but I am super nervous. My palms are sweaty. I can't see why.
running a space, but we also have skills. Like for instance, I teach so I didn't develop the course. So the impact is we're going to expand our offerings. Yeah, it has been a lot
All right, we're going to continue. Thank you so much for playing along with this. It was great seeing everybody talking.
All right, everybody, we're gonna get going again. Thank you so much for the active discussion. I love like seeing like this heated discussions and the energy in the room. Is there anybody who shared technology that's not generative AI? Okay, yeah. Which technology were you? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we were discussing about the virtual coaching to not always talk about AI. And yeah, we came up with a discussion if virtual coaching, for example, for students would be interesting. However, also that it could be a cultural topic if they really would use it. Yeah, so with regard to the risk that you provide it maybe to your students, but they have no time. They do not feel comfortable to share thoughts with coaches, external coaches. So this was our discussion there.
How's it aligned with your organization's priority at the moment?
That's a good question. Because we are free in research and lectures, so but I mean, increasing students, I would always say if this is fitting to what we want to achieve, so it should be in the strategic direction.
Yeah, students are always at the center, right?
In our case, yeah.
All the educators. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. Did you? So I'm sure, like you, by discussing through these questions with your partner, I hope that you gain some more additional insights that you haven't thought of. So, and the purpose of this, and the reason why this could be a great conversation tool for your team level reflections is, one, you can engage your team members who may not have thought about this technology. So that's like basically a little step to encourage interest and discovery, but also two, just by facilitating these discussions, you're already bringing them on as part of the change management. So we find that really effective as just as simple as a conversation tool that you can just like take at the team meeting to just like think about these aspects of questions with your team or organizations or your stakeholders.
All right, so let's look at step number 2 in this framework, which is to set targeted goals, because we know we cannot attempt to achieve everything all at once. So this is based on a lot of, it's based on research from a lot of different sources. You can find other frameworks about tech fluency, for example, from UNESCO, local governments. So you could research and find sources that feel like they relate to your specific context. This was a synthesis of all of that. And it was contextualized for the corporate learning environment and for emerging tech, which is, of course, different than when you're talking about fluency for mature technology. So these are 4 dimensions that we have set as different goals we might have at different times, not attempting to do everything in a single intervention. You have the discover dimension of emerging tech fluency, which is when you can have people fostering this mindset of openness so that they can be curious and they can be ready for change. So this is the essential first step, especially when people are feeling anxious or fearful, or on the other hand, when they're just falling for all the hype and they think this is going to solve everything tomorrow, right now, if we use it. The second dimension is know and think. So here's where you're helping people build this foundational tech knowledge so that they can build a perspective on what are the possibilities that this emerging technology could help us solve, and start to dream about what is possible with this. You have play and imagine, which is where you support people to envision what are the different opportunities, the different use cases, the ways in which you could use this to enhance the learning experiences. And finally, you have engage, which is more about building a culture of sustained innovation, collaborative learning, and where people are exchanging insights. So the main thing here is to set a specific targeted goal, not trying to do everything all at once. And you can adapt these same ones that you have here. We think that these might be relevant to different contexts, or you could do some research on different frameworks for tech fluency and build your own dimensions. So now we're going to do just a silent reflection. We would like you to read these different dimensions and think, for the technology you had in mind for the last activity, what would be a realistic and practical goal for you and for your team to achieve, let's say, in the next few months? So if you were to walk away from here with one action in mind, with a plan, which of these would make sense to you? And of course, if you have a different one in mind, if you want to combine a couple, entirely up to you, but we would love for you to just think, imagine about one goal you could achieve. Would anybody like to share any ideas?
Usually the process here is just think about where your team or yourself is. Are you sensing some fear and anxiety around this technology, or do you observe some confusion, or do you see any desire for additional information or additional knowledge or additional perspective? So usually this can happen by just like going through some user research or interviews, something as simple as just surveying around just to understand their needs, and just to help you think about the technology and your targeted fluency goals. Think about where your team is, and then see what might be the current focus that you would like to start thinking about the actions around.
If anybody has a goal and a technology they'd like to share. Yeah.
So my company, or my team on my company, is really open to technology. So I think we'd like to do virtual avatars, but we need a lot more information of capabilities and prices. Yep.
All right. So that sounds like your past discover, probably know and think. You're starting to think about the different possibilities, the opportunities, the risks, weighing pros and cons. All right. Yes, we have another one.
We just purchased some new things, but we haven't like gotten to using them yet. They're just like add-ons for the LMS. But I think the play and imagine stage is kind of where we're at with that, because a big part of getting buy-in from like our faculty is going to be having a base of good examples, and also just iterating with it yourself, because like that's how we learn to use something well.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay, thank you so much again for sharing like where your teams are. Moving on to the next part of our approach, which is taking incremental action. So again, as I mentioned, like we all are aware that many of us are going through different types of constraints and challenges. And this part of the approach is like really focusing on taking actions, small, easy actions that can be done within what you already have before you wait for all the conditions to be perfect. So here's at the lab, for the past 2 to 3 years, we've been really focusing on building capabilities within our L&D team of about 500 colleagues on emerging technology topics, whether that's VR or metaverse back in the day when metaverse was really going through the hype cycle, and also Web3 and generative AI. And these are some of the actions that we have tried and found extremely helpful for us to navigate through our own constraints and challenges, which may sound a bit relevant for your cases, and mapped by different dimensions of fluency that we just shared earlier. So let me give you a bit of a recent example of our fluency building journey on generative AI for the past couple of years to just like highlight some of these examples by dimensions. So very first example that we really wanted to highlight was having some direct, candid dialogues, inviting in-house experts who may have expertise on the technology, but also inviting those leaders from your team. So in our case, for example, we had a lot of experts in generative AI and machine learning space who absolutely did not know anything about our own world, leadership and development. And we had leadership and development, L&D leaders, who were interested in some topics around AI, but did not feel so much confident talking about this topic because they did not have expertise in these areas. So initially we were looking for external experts who had expertise in both areas, and they're very rare, and sometimes it can take like forever for us to grab their time. So what we ended up doing was just opening up a candid and open forum for them to actually have some honest conversations around these technologies. So the most pressing question that we receive from our colleagues is, will AI replace my job? Right? So it was incredibly helpful to open up by sharing such vulnerability to increase the curiosity to learn a bit more about this technology. So this activity was pretty helpful for us to navigate through the constraints of limited expertise in our space and also externally, and also focusing on the discover dimension of our fluency goals. The second part was we were on budget constraints. This was considered a side project for us at the beginning, and we were already doing full-time job on like designing and producing and delivering learning programs for our colleagues. So instead of focusing on creating a new learning asset, we actually focused our time on curating the external content that are relevant for our field. So that gave us a lot of time and energy efficiency in terms of going through and delivering some relevant content for fluency. And that really focused on know and think dimension of the fluency goals. and we obviously did some smaller scale like workshops with colleagues based in local areas. And what we did was instead of inviting some experts and also spending budget on people to come in to teach us on this topic, we actually used this activity called research and teach back. So what we ended up doing was dividing all these assignments on topics for our colleagues to go out there and research, because most of our colleagues are adult learners. They know how to go about researching and also finding information about these topics, and then teaching back. And the teaching back activity sort of help us reinforce the learning. So collectively, after researching and teaching back, we were able to also build internal focused mini perspectives around what our thoughts and what our insights were around AI back then. Moving on to the dimensions around engage, which is around exchanging ideas and new insights across the board as part of the community, was focusing on some spotlight interviews, which basically had focused on like having some scrappy version of videos, not the professionally produced videos, but just scrappy version of it, just inviting colleagues to talk about their examples, demoing sometimes, and also sharing their thoughts, and just quickly just launching some Slack post about that spotlight topic, and then just like facilitating the conversation in the thread. And that was just a very quick action, but really influential for our team members to steer their conversations and their thought processes and ideations about like use cases of Gen AI in their personal productivity. We did some collaborative learning rituals called AI Fridays, where we will be introducing different types of challenges with some example prompts for our colleagues to go out and then try with using some tools that were approved by the company. Finally, we started forming the groups of AI champions who could then radiate different activities and interests and also discussions in their local hub. So AI champions were located, we're a global team. So some of the AI champions were located in some Asian countries and European countries and different parts of North America and Central and Latin America as well. South America. Sorry, I'm going through like some, blackout moments here. So these examples are incredibly helpful for us to navigate through different constraints. And now I would love to encourage everybody to go back into your peers, someone who's sitting next to you, and then talk about what actions you can maybe initiate to work towards the fluency goal that you thought of earlier. So there are some examples that we share on the screen, but also you can feel free to, I'm sure like you've tried different types of activity that worked with your team. So see if there are anything that you would like to share with your team and also try out once you go back. Okay, so we're gonna give about 5 minutes. So it's 2:57 p.m. So maybe let's give ourselves about 5 minutes. Oh, it's sweaty.
I can't see.
Oh my God.
I can't see. No, you're perfect. Like I can.
Oh, I am sweating.
Let me go and take pictures from the back of the room. Really great on time.
So 305. The 305 or 304.
Yeah, I think 305. So thank you for jumping in and adding more. We'll go for the long pause and let them be super
I was almost like ready to like, oh, raise your hand.
Yeah.
Or saying really like the idea of teach back. Also, more here, also about teach back concept.
Okay. That's great. Okay. Helpful. Thank you.
If there are questions, I'll add to
Okay, should I round them up?
Let's give them one more minute. Okay. All right, time is up. Thank you again for playing.
Okay, let's get back to our large group discussion here. Obviously, thank you so much for great engagement here. I'm getting a lot of nice positive energy, and this helps for my anxiety here. So thank you so much for being an active participant here. Is there anyone who shared different types of actions that are not on the screen? Anybody who shared the actions that we haven't actually covered on the screen at all? Okay. Oh, go ahead. Yep.
I don't know if it's a different action, but one of the things we discussed that we had in common was how long does it take to actually put together an offering in a course and all the different things you have to go through to get there. And so in your discover, know and think, play and imagine, engage, we even took that a step further and say, okay, how do you line up the video presentation? What about the subject matter experts that have to, go back and forth a lot of times to get the material right? And all those steps that also are intertwined with taking the actions that we need to complete a course. And we measured it, I think the two of us was in terms of months, but it could take a year or two.
Because also it's like the red tape. So like at a higher university, so you get something approved, vetted, and like just okay to do it. Technology has already moved on. So by the time, at least for us and your position, that's half the battle, getting it approved and vetted.
Oh, going through like all the governance and then the approval process. I see.
So there's a whole lot of other stuff that happens along this continuum.
And at that point, technology has moved on to the next thing. So by the time my university says, okay, go ahead, we give you the license to go ahead and do this.
Yeah, I guess what I'm hearing here is that there's a bit of
maybe ridiculous. I don't know if ridiculous is the right term. Is just going through this very long process of approval and governance. Are there any, just curious to learn a bit more about your settings and environments. Are there any interest groups, like informal interest groups? Or are there any informal channels that can sort of spread grassroots level of interest?
There are a lot of teams groups that like people will, we lean on teams and groups that will say, I have this, it's working. And then we'll try to jump onto that too, or onto their license for that. So that way it's already approved and we don't have to double dip. I know you already know all this, but then the university comes through and wants to, do a financial check of who is using this. We're cutting this here, and you have to go back through. It can be exhausting. And like I said, at that point, the technology is already advanced elsewhere. So you're back at, finding another way. So.
Yes, we are a huge organization. We're an organization of 40,000 plus, right? And we also have very different tiers of governance structure. If sometimes it's a little bit difficult to navigate this structure, we don't even necessarily know if there's a clarity in like who to go to get such approvals sometimes. And what we are finding here, and I don't know if it is 100% applicable for your setting, is sort of navigating the easy path to influence the change as opposed to implementing the change. So we're sort of trying to focus on having more followers, embedding a bit more followers on these technologies to go out there, experiment, and also imagine, and also share with each other so that there is a bit of a growing little sprouting like influence on these technologies, encouraging these informal channels in case if the organization is going through a very strict governance structure and also very complicated structure to get anything approved. Thank you so much for sharing that example. That's certainly something that we constantly also struggle in our own context. So very, very great to validate how this can be so challenging. Okay, this is a great moment to talk about actually how to sustain this. And it's a little bit relevant to what we just discussed, how it is important for us to like think about sustaining these little actions to a point where we can achieve a bigger change and then longer term innovation.
So to wrap up here, we wanted to leave you with a few messages of the lessons that we have learned about how you might make this sustainable. So the title of this session was From Overwhelming to Innovative. We would love for you to think of innovation not necessarily as building something new. So a lot of times we think that innovation means that we need to be creating new things that are revolutionary, just like Gen AI. But if you think of it as an ongoing iteration of how you work and how you create, it becomes a lot more manageable for you to think about how you could be innovative in your day-to-day. The other thing that we've been saying a lot is to start small. So that's the big takeaway, because if you sit and wait for your constraints to disappear and for everything to be, approved and ready for you to move on, it's going to be too late and the innovation will already be old news. So think about, for example, you can ask yourself, what could I do in 1 hour? What could I do with just one other colleague? And start that teeny tiny. And then from there, you start to get a little bit of momentum and you can keep going to bigger things. And then zoom out and think about all the different variables that are impacting the mindsets and the behaviors of your colleagues and everybody in the organization. Because there are, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of things that are influencing how people decide to go about innovating or not. So think, do they have the right skills? Do they know how to do the new behavior that you would like them to do? Do you have the role models in the organization that are actually showing you how you want to have everybody in the organization behave? Do you have leadership support? And are they actually doing as they preach? Do people really truly believe that this is going in the right direction? So do they understand the why behind the actions that you're asking them to take? Do they believe that this is the right thing to do? And finally, what are the reinforcing mechanisms? What is the system around everybody? Are you actually rewarding the behaviors of innovation or not? So think, for example, about your performance reviews, for example. Are you actually rewarding people for experimenting, even if that experiment turns out to not be so great? But, think about the things you want to achieve and try to reinforce that even in the smallest ways.
Okay, so we are getting close to the end of this session, and let's take a little moment to reflect on our discussion so far. So we started off with this critical question. We have this big, bold, aspiration about our role being super critical to equipping our organization and our learners for the future. And how can we equip ourselves in order to perform that role, to adapt and lead through changes in innovation involving emerging technologies within the bounds of our constraints? And this was basically the approach that we are taking within our team. And we had a little bit of a teaser view of what that process looks like by just going through the fun and very engaging discussions with your peers in this room. If let's say we finish this session and you want to report out what you learned from this session with your team, is there any key takeaways or questions or anything that you want to share with us right now? Yep.
I was just texting with my team and sharing some screenshots and sharing takeaways, so I have it really fresh. And what I said, my takeaway from this presentation was first that we're not the only ones overwhelmed with emerging tech, and that a framework like this can help us make decisions where what do we pursue or what we set aside or maybe wait. I really like the graph that you shared. Like, okay, so do we wait and see, or do we take action really fast on this particular technology? So I really liked everything. That was my takeaway. We're not the only ones. We're not alone. Thanks for the help.
Thank
Definitely
you.
not
And
alone.
concurrently, we were also thinking, oh, we're not the only one, right? Okay.
I think the biggest one here is start small and do incremental changes rather than wait for everything to be done in one big, huge mountain effort. Just so I think that's how you get things rolling.
Yes. Yes.
How do you go about getting buy-in so that everyone's involved together without resistance?
Yes, getting buy-in is extremely helpful, extremely difficult, and sometimes especially coming from the leadership. So one of the key things that we did here was, remember the photo where we did like immersion workshops? One of the immersion workshops that we did was intentionally inviting every leader across different teams within our L&D org. So there were about 15 of us. And what we went through was specifically going through the future of our talent pipeline that are influenced by generative AI, and what are the skills that we need to prep our team members in preparation for the future. Because when we joined that workshop, all the leaders were already, it was already this year, early, like back in January, and it was already after maybe like a year of like buzzwords and hype cycles around like generative AI. So at least like all the leaders were aware that we need to do something about it. So the workshop sort of focused on what are the actions do we need to take in order to upskill our team members, and through that process, we were able to build a pipeline of actions and projects that we can actually implement to further and formalize this type of fluency activities. So involving them as part of a workshop to shape the future pipeline of activities was a little bit helpful to get their buy-in, because going through the process of discussions, we were able to get their buy-in automatically.
And we're out of time now, but we're ready for the break. And if anybody wants to talk more about this, we'll be happy to. You can connect with us. Here are the QR codes to get our LinkedIns and our emails. We would be more than happy to go on this journey with you. Just a quick reminder, it's a very long journey. It won't happen overnight. We're all in the same boat. We're all struggling with this. So every small action that we take, even as an industry, it all leads us to this ongoing iteration towards a better future where our learners are more resilient and more agile. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much.